Hi, welcome to Ghoulin Around. I'm Loretta Mooney. I'm your host today, and joining me is
Joanne Massey.
And Jason Massey.
And today we're actually going to be talking about monsters. We've all picked a monster. We did some research, found out like where the origin of it came. We decided to look up different items, different things on the monsters. So we're just going to go one by one and let you know what we found out on our monsters. I picked zombies, and Joanne picked
The Mummy.
And Jason?
Werewolves.
So we're going to start with Jason over here.
All right. So let's get in on werewolves. So the first thing I found is the term werewolf comes from two different places. So in Old English, there's werewolf, just W-E-R, and then wolf, W-U-L-F. And it literally means man-wolf. How creative. And then the term lycanthrope, which is also associated with werewolves. You hear them called werewolves, lycanthropes, and whatnot. So that comes from the Greek term. Not going to try to pronounce it because, I'm terrible with pronunciations. But it literally comes out to wolf person. Yet again, how creative. So, the concept of werewolves basically came in Europe. Basically during the medieval era to the late modern ages, and it spread to the New World with colonialism, as most things. And so werewolves really picked up the craze during the witch trials, so it kind of developed parallel to it. So as witches got more popular, the whole werewolf allegations got more popular. They actually had their own trials. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
They had werewolf trials as well as witch trials. It was more of a Switzerland thing. That was where it was really popular. So it picked up during the 15th century, and then the 16th and 17th were where it got really popular, and then it dropped off during the 18th because people started coming to their senses. And so a lot of allegations regarding if you're a werewolf or whatnot was usually very loose, kind of like with witches, where it's like just whatever the public deemed. It's like, oh yeah, you're a witch because you're just weird. And the same thing kind of went with werewolves. One of the things was some people decided to tame werewolves or charm them or ride them. And a lot of people were like, well, if you're able to do that, you're a werewolf. So a lot of people who got accused of being werewolves were wolf riders or wolf tamers or whatnot. So yeah, and then there was a really famous werewolf trial called the Werewolf of Bedburg. You ever heard of it?
No.
No?
No.
All right. So this is a really interesting story. So this guy named Peter Stump, so he got his name Stump from the fact that he was missing his left hand.
Kind of.
And so
I can see that coming, by the way.
It left a stump, so people always called him Peter Stump. And people theorized that while he was a werewolf, his left paw got cut off, and so when he turned to human, he had his left hand gone. And so he during the trial of 1959 was when it happened. So they put him on a stretcher and they stretched him, and then after they stretched him, they wanted to do further torture, and we're like, oh, we're going to torture you. And so he confessed, and he confessed to a lot of stuff, like really messed up stuff. So he confessed and told them that he had made a arrangement with the devil where he could, and I'm going to quote him on this, turn into the likeness of a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body and mighty paws.
Wow.
So yeah, that's what he told them the devil let him do, and he told them also that he had a belt that the devil gifted him, and whenever he wore this belt, he turned into a werewolf, and whenever he took it off, turned back into a human. No belt was ever found. So, yeah, and then, he also confessed to killing a total of 16 people, 14 of which were children, 2 of which were pregnant ladies, and he told them about how he would rip the fetus out of them. So, that's dark. And then one of the
I guess
children...
when you're being tortured, you might confess to just about anything.
Yeah, he went on. And one of the things that they also kind of conjectured was that... So he had 2 offspring, his 15-year-old daughter and a son that no one knew how old he was. So one of the children that he killed allegedly is his own son, and because he talked about ripping the brain from his son. So, yeah. Yeah, he also, here's where it comes into like confessing about a lot of other things. He confessed to having sex with a succubus sent by the devil as well.
Okay.
So yeah, he obviously was not that together, obviously. Yeah, so after his confession and whatnot, he was put to the wheel, where bits of his flesh were torn off with hot pincers. Also, the people broke all of his limbs because they thought if he returned to life from the afterlife that he wouldn't be able to do anything because his arms and legs were all broken. So yeah, they tore off his skin.
obviously also believed in zombies.
Obviously. So they tore off his skin, broke his limbs, and then they finally beheaded him. And then they burned his body with his daughter's body because he also said that he had an incestuous relationship with his daughter.
Oh my gosh.
And
So they killed her?
Yes, his daughter was flayed and strangled before being burned with his body. And then as a symbol to the rest of the town to like not be a werewolf, they took a giant pike and they put a wheel on it, the same wheel, and they put like a little figure of a wolf, and then they put his head on top of it, and then they put it at the entrance of the town.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's pretty good. Not good. It's pretty interesting, like when you see it, and they there's even pictures that people have drawn, like at the time, like there's little pictures that they drew of like the town, like all the people getting wheeled and whatnot, and in the background you can see the pike that they're talking about where it has the head, the wolf, and the wheel.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of drawings and whatnot from the time. Yeah. So after the trials basically ended in the 18th century, werewolves became more of an interest to folklore studies and gothic horror genre. Like that's when people like really started looking into werewolves. So yeah, one guy talked about how they talked about how werewolves came to be, and one guy was talking about in ancient Greek, this 2nd century BC geographer Pausanias, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Okay.
Yeah, they had weird names back then.
Yeah.
And he talked about the story of this guy named Lycaon, Lycaon, and how, so he wanted to test if Zeus was an actual god. So what he did was he sacrificially murdered a child and then tried to feed Zeus the flesh. Zeus got pissed and turned him into a wolf. And apparently that's where he believes like the whole werewolf thing comes from, in ancient Greece at least. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so a lot of cultures in Europe have like this whole thing where werewolves are to be feared, like they're agents of the devil and whatnot. In Asia, it's completely different, like completely. So in Turkic shamans, they would the legend is, they would perform long and arduous rites, and they would be transformed into a wolf. However, the wolf was seen as a like ancestor to the Turkic people, so they would actually be treated with respect.
Oh, okay.
So it was like a symbol of like just being worthy of respect is being turned into a wolf. So it's completely different. Yeah, so that's basically like the past of it. And then some people also try to explain it in terms of medical anomalies, like how people got alleged to turn into werewolves. One guy, Dr. Lee Illis, in his 1963 paper on porphyria. Yeah. So porphyria and the etiology of werewolves. So he basically surmised that the people who were alleged of being werewolves suffered from congenital porphyria. And so he said that the symptoms of this would lead to photosensitivity, reddish teeth, and psychosis, and that he alleged that these symptoms would be enough for the people of the time to accuse these people of werewolves, because I mean, it didn't take much to get people to be accused of witches.
Well, yeah.
So I wouldn't imagine it would have
much to
taken any
accuse
much more
somebody
for werewolf.
of anything, really, back in those days.
Yeah, so that's what he basically talked about. However, another Dr. Ian Woodward in 1979, the werewolf delusion, basically combated it, and he suggested more or less rabies would be the cause of it. Because he pointed out that a lot of werewolf legends, it's like in order to turn into a werewolf, you have to be scratched or bitten by a werewolf. And he's like, that's more or less the same way rabies is treated. Like if a wolf has rabies and it bites you, you'll get rabies.
Yeah.
And so he's like, that could lead to the whole legend of like, oh, I got bit by a wolf and now I'm a werewolf, and then people murder you.
Okay.
So that's...
that kind of makes sense, though.
Yeah. So he basically combated the other guy and was like, no, this is probably really what happened. Yeah, except the one thing that combats Woodward's suggestion of rabies is the fact that in the earliest werewolf things, being bit has nothing to do with it. It's all magic and whatnot. Like, you don't have to be bit to turn into a werewolf. So other people pointed that out, and I was like, well, that probably also didn't happen, but it's the most logical suggestion. Yeah. So here's some of the traits and appearances for different werewolves. So in European werewolves, the traits that you can identify a werewolf by, that people alleged, would be the meeting of both eyebrows and curved fingernails. So basically a unibrow, and then if you didn't treat your fingernails. And then they also said if you had a swinging stride, so if you walked down the street and you were like swinging yourself, with like, werewolf.
Wow.
Wow. Now that one's crazy.
Yeah. And and one thing that they also said was there's a way to identify a werewolf, and this is still European, is if you walk up to someone who is a werewolf and you take his skin and you cut it off, if it has fur underneath, then he's a werewolf.
Like he's inside out?
Yeah. And then in Russia, they said that if you have bristles under your tongue, it's a werewolf. Yeah. So the appearance of werewolves also doesn't really change much from culture to culture. It's all usually like either a wolf or a wolf-man hybrid. A lot of cultures say that the werewolf commonly is just a wolf without no tail. So if you see a wolf without a tail, it's a werewolf. And that also these wolves would usually be larger with human eyes. So,
okay.
But usually werewolves come out at night, so a lot of people surmise that, they just saw wolves that maybe had their tails tucked or whatnot. Because during night in that time, you didn't have like flashlights or whatnot, so you can't really see that well.
Yeah, you can't see that well.
Let's see. So yeah, Sweden. Yeah. They also talked about how at night when the werewolf is running around, it would actually only run on 3 paws, and it would stick its 4th one behind it to look like a tail, so that it would hide.
How the hell do you run on 3?
I know that when I read that, I was like, run on 3 foot? That sounds like extremely weird, because...
I mean, I've seen some dogs that are missing, like, one back leg or something, but, like, if you're talking about the front one, like, how are you gonna...
Well, it's the back one.
Okay.
Because it's the 2 in front, and then 1, and then the back one sticks out to look like a tail.
Well, I've seen dogs run like that, so I guess it's okay.
Yeah. But still, like, it would be very... Like, even when you see a dog without a leg running, it's very obvious that the dog's not exactly running, or... I don't know how to say it. Like, it doesn't have a perfect stride.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So becoming a werewolf also doesn't really change much throughout history. A lot of people say that you get bit or you get clawed or whatnot, but also other cultures have that you would actually be rubbed down with this magical salve, whatever it's called. Salve?
Sure.
Salve.
Yeah, it's like an ointment for medicinal purposes. And some cultures surmise that they would make it with a magical like incantation or something and then rub people down, and then they would turn into werewolves. So I thought that was interesting. A lot of also it makes no sense. But other cultures also talk about how the werewolf thing is is either like a curse or like a blessing based on like if you make an alliance with the devil, then like he'll grant you the power of being a werewolf. Or if like the case of Lycan, he would be turned into a werewolf because he got cursed from Zeus. So a lot of other people point that out. In Livonia, Jesus, I lost my train of thought. Edit that out. Or leave it in. But yeah, so in Livonia, they would actually brew a special kind of beer and they would give it to people, and then after you drank it, you would stand around for like an hour or so in a circle and repeat a special incantation, and that would allegedly turn you into a werewolf.
So it's pretty much magical still.
Yeah, like, so a lot of things are still talking about how it's usually magical or curse-ridden, all superstitious and supernatural, of course. In Italy, France, Germany, they talked about how if specifically on a Wednesday or Friday, if you slept outside and had the moon on your face, you would wake up the next night and be a werewolf. I know how specific it has to be, where it's like, if you do it on Monday, nope. If you do it on Wednesday, though, you're good. So yeah, they're very
funny.
odd. So yeah, cures, however, are vastly different between cultures. So in the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that to cure a werewolf, you just exhaust the person. Their reason for that is that a werewolf would wake up the next morning in human form and he would be exhausted, tired, you know. So if you did that to him during the day, he would not turn into a werewolf.
Because he'd be too tired.
Yeah. So their whole method was just exhaust the person and you are free to be a human. Yeah. In medieval Europe, however, they had 3 different ways to cure werewolfism, lycanthropy. So first one is medicinally. They would make a drink consisting of wolfsbane, and then they would drink it and then allegedly be cured. And then also they would surgically try to do it. I don't know how you would try to do that.
That's kind of scary.
Yeah, they would just operate on you and try to cure your affliction. And then the third way is exorcism, as always. Yes. However, in medieval Europe, all of these would always prove fatal. They would always kill the person.
Yes,
so,
I can see that happening.
In Sicilian culture, this actually has Arabic origin. What they would do is you would take a knife and just strike them on the forehead. And that would cure your wolfism. Your werewolfism.
You're
exactly.
Cured.
I'm cured. Hallelujah.
Wow.
And then their other way was that you would pierce their hands with nails.
I like just hitting them in the face with a knife.
Yeah, like I would definitely take that over being pierced with nails. It's like, I'm a werewolf. Hit me with a knife. Hit me. Yeah. However, these the next two are very less extreme, and they're actually pretty good. Like if I was a werewolf, treat me in Germany or Dane. Yeah. So Germany, how they believe to cure werewolfism is address the person 3 times by their Christian name, and then you're good to go.
Wow.
Yeah, so just call them 3 times by their names, and then they're good. Yeah, so I would definitely prefer that. And then Danish culture suggests just scolding them. So basically, if you just yelled at the person for being a werewolf, they would be fine. Wow. So yeah, if you had someone who's a werewolf, just be like, no doing that. And they'd be good. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. Also, for fictional cures, I found these interesting. So in Supernatural, they have werewolves of their own. And like Supernatural talks about all these different monsters and myths and how to combat them. And in the show, they cure a lady. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah. And how they cured her was basically you take the plasma, like the blood plasma and whatnot, you do like a plasma therapy between the werewolf that made the person and the person themselves, as long as the person hasn't fed as a werewolf yet.
Yes.
So, yeah, I thought that was an interesting way to cure it. And then there's a video game, Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. You can turn into a werewolf in that. And the cure, I actually like the idea of the cure. So basically, how to cure yourself is you go to a witch that cursed you to become a werewolf. It's a whole spiel. And you take her head, and then you go to this ancient tomb that has a fire. You throw the head in the fire, and it takes your beast spirit out of you, and it becomes its own living being, and you kill it. And then you're cured. So, like, you basically fight your beast spirit.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then... So, let's get back to real life. So, as time has progressed, like, nowadays in movies, they're always shown as, like, these horror monsters and whatnot. But recently, in the last, like, decade or so, they're more sympathetic, where they're played as more heroes and whatnot. So, they're not so evil and whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, basically that's it for werewolves.
Okay, so for werewolves, then, what would be your favorite movie with werewolves?
Favorite movie with werewolves? There's a lot of movies with werewolves.
Yes,
the
there is.
entire
There is.
Underworld series.
Yes.
I would have to go with Werewolf in London. It was so entertaining to watch.
It was. It really was.
Mm-hmm.
What about yours?
The same.
Yeah.
I loved it for the funny aspects. Like, I loved him waking up in the zoo.
Yeah.
It's just perfect.
After the first time he turns into a werewolf, he wakes up in the wolf pen of the zoo, and he just like gets up and he looks around. He's completely naked, and his reaction to waking up is so good.
I do like that movie, but I also do like the lichens that they have in Underworld.
Mm-hmm.
Those, they're badass.
Yeah, I started watching the Penny Dreadful. Like, I watched the entire first season, and they have like vampires and witches and stuff like that. And then at the very end of season 1, one of the main characters turns into a werewolf and kills everybody in the bar, and that's how it ends. And you're just like, and it was a scary werewolf. Like, and he's a really nice guy. You've been following this character the whole time. You love this character, and he's not a good person. So, I mean, he's still a good person. He doesn't know that it happens when it happens.
Yeah, a lot of werewolf cultures have that, where if you don't willingly want the whole werewolf thing, that a lot of the time when you wake up, you don't remember what you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then interesting fact. So in werewolf culture, like, a lot of people know, like, oh, kill people with silver bullets or silver blades or whatnot. That didn't even start until 1935.
Oh, wow.
So before that, all werewolf culture is basically, they're just a normal wolf where you can kill them with just normal things. But in 1935, they did a retelling of the Beast of Javandon. I'm mispronouncing that, I know it. And so it was a French story that it takes place in the town of Javandon. And so it takes place in there, and a lot of modern day retellings after 1935 include this whole bit of using like a magical bullet and whatnot, when before that no werewolf culture really had that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
so it's pretty much made up for movies.
yeah. So basically blame fiction for the whole silver thing. So if you encounter a werewolf, don't fight with silver. I mean, fight with silver if you have it, just kill it with anything. Or strike it on the head with a knife.
Yeah. You're cured.
Scold it.
Yeah.
Werewolf breaks in, no! And then you're good.
What's your full name?
What's your full name? I need to call you 3 times. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, which werewolf do you prefer in, like, horror movies? Do you prefer, like, they just look like a wolf, or like a wolf-man hybrid?
Full wolf.
Like just a normal wolf?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like, bigger and
Just
like...
a bigger wolf. As
Yeah,
compared
bigger
to,
and
like,
more
a
like
hybrid.
mean, but like, I don't like when they look like mannish.
Yeah,
I guess.
where they walk on 2 feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really weird.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, I like just the ones that look more like wolves.
Yeah, I think they're more terrifying.
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
They are.
All right. So that's my spiel on werewolves.
Okay. So
Very good.
Yeah, you've got a lot of information there. That's actually pretty cool.
Mine doesn't compare to my little...
Yeah, mine will be even less, because it's not going to have, cures and things like that, because...
Zombies.
I partially blame that
Zombies, they're
on my curiosity as a werewolf. So, they call me procrastinators because I did this the night before, as always. And I started reading about werewolves, and it's one of those things where as I was reading more and more, I just couldn't help myself, and I was clicking links, and I was opening all these things.
I was doing the same thing with zombies, because there's a lot of information, but there's not as much different type of information than what you
there's
have.
a lot in terms of whole werewolf culture. So, yeah. I had 6 pages of information. So,
and then we have Joanne with her
on a
mummy.
single page.
Yep.
No, she's got double. It's on the back.
It's more or less
Yeah.
single.
So, for me, like, I do know some of the werewolf stuff, and I do know a lot about vampires. And
Yes.
I didn't want to cheat myself out of, like, learning new education, so
Yeah.
I picked the Mummy because I don't really know too much on how it became a monster in our genre. I mean, we all kind of know what mummies are and, like, mummification and, like, ancient Egypt, but how did that become what we know today?
Like, how did a common practice become a horror monster?
Yeah, exactly. Medical practice.
Yeah.
Ding, ding. Yeah, medical alert. So, I'm pretty sure a lot of people know that the ancient Egyptians practiced mummification. A lot of other cultures did too, including like Aztecs, Incas, ancient Europe, even African cultures used to practice mummification. And basically the ones we know is Egyptian, because the pyramids and the tombs were just great expeditions for most people.
They made it a huge mainstream thing. Like, when you think mummification, you always just ancient Egyptian.
Automatically go to Egyptian.
So the ancient Egyptian practice is they would actually take these bodies, they would wash them first to get them kind of pure and rid of like the dirt, because they're going to go to the afterlife after this. And then they would remove all the organs and place them in the jars. They would also put the body in salt to kind of dehydrate it, like we're going to make jerky now, so. And then they would embalm the bodies. They would actually embalm them kind of like we do today to preserve them. And then they would wrap them in just cloth with some kind of chemicals to kind of preserve the bodies as well. And then they would bury them in these very elaborate tombs with all their riches and even their slaves and their pets. So, I mean, can you imagine if you're like a 10-year-old slave and your master dies?
Well, rip.
Yeah, you're going with. So it was, I can't imagine being like that. Please stay alive, please stay alive.
You'd be guarding him with your life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. CPR, that's when it first came out. So that's kind of where mummification, like, the origin of it, but it actually didn't come into our culture until after we went in and what's the word I'm thinking of? Extracted King Tut.
Yeah.
I think it was 1922.
Yeah.
We extracted King Tut, and there was so many deaths around this expedition, and so people started to fear like the whole mommy concept. So it came out like really like not too long ago in the 1920s. And then the first movie to depict the mommy as a monster was in 1932, The Mommy, and it had Boris Karloff in it. He played Imhotep. And we all know that movie because we've all seen the remake with Brendan Fraser.
Fraser, yep.
But they were first depicted as kind of like zombies, where they were really slow, kind of like brain dead, with the arms out.
Brought back to life from the dead by magic means.
Yeah. And so they weren't really scary for quite a while.
They weren't these modern day mummies that you imagine where they're fast. They're basically humans just with magic powers and are undead.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the 1932 Mummy with Boris Karloff was the first video that we had reference to this monster. But actually before that, I think like early 1900s, I think it was like 1908 or something, Bram Stoker actually wrote a book called The Jewel of the Seven Stars, where he actually had the mommy in it as a supernatural villain. So we kind of had it a little bit before King Tut, but not quite.
See, and that really shocked me when you told me that it was Bram Stoker.
Yeah. Him and his monsters.
Yeah, him and his monsters. And obviously he takes them from, like, history and just kind of twists them a little bit.
Yeah.
Because if anybody knows that he was actually the one that actually created vampirism. He's the one that created vampires in his book Dracula, and took that from Vlad Dracula, which was a real person. So
the Impaler.
Vlad the Impaler. By the way, Vlad the Impaler. But I guess he was just a big history buff, and they just decided to twist all this stuff, is what it sounds like.
Yeah, and so we had that earlier book that nobody really knew about, and then we had the Mummy, and then later on they actually made the Jewel of Seven Stars into a movie, and the Mummy was feared even more because there was a lot of deaths around this movie as well. So it was kind of like this curse everybody associated with this monster, and that's how we came to like fear this monster. And it wasn't originally like that. It was just a practice for the dead to, go on to a better life. And then that's about it. I mean, like, you had the really slow, like, Mummies, and then it wasn't until the Brendan Fraser remake of The Mummy where they actually became very fast-paced, very smart, out to kill you. Like,
they're more or less just undead
terrifying.
Humans.
Yeah.
Like, the Mummy in that one was absolutely terrifying. Like, you better watch out.
So many, like, magical abilities and things. Like, he turned into, like, the whole, like, sand cloud thing.
Yeah.
At various points in the film.
So it's very recent on the Mummies thing. I remember, like, when I was growing up, I think my first encounter with, like, the Mummy, it was like the Ghoul School with Scooby-Doo.
Oh, yeah.
They had the little mummy girl.
Yeah, the mummy girl.
The little mummy girl.
Yeah.
Oh my god, I forgot that movie.
That was such a cute movie. I loved it.
I think that was Lena's favorite, too.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Such a good movie.
Yeah. And then, like, as I got older, like, obviously I saw The Mummy and other movies, but by the time I saw The Mummy, it was the Brendan Fraser one, so of course it was like, whoa, this thing is scary, not this slow kind of zombified thing. And, we've loved this. This movie has been remade a lot. Like, if you actually go on, like, IMDb and look up, like, Mummy movies, it's like, The Mummy, The Mummy, The Mummy, The Mummy. And I'm just like, how many of these movies are there?
Speaking of The Mummy, did you watch the one with Tom Cruise in it?
No.
I have not seen the new one.
I did not watch it either.
No.
Everything I've heard is it's terrible.
Yeah.
I heard it was, too, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yeah.
So, how do you think you kill a mummy?
I would always assume fire.
Yes, you burn it.
Yes. Because mummies traditionally, like, is the undead body in cloth. Cloth is flammable.
Yeah.
So just light that up and then you're good.
Yeah.
Then a lot of, like, things with some zombie cultures and some other things with undead is you always burn the undead to give them rest.
We've
for
learned
one
this
night.
from Supernatural.
Yep. Salt and burn it.
Salt and burn it.
Hunter funeral.
Yeah. And so when the 1932 The Mummy came out with Imhotep, Imhotep was brought back to life by reading this scroll, and then he falls in love with this woman who looks like the reincarnation of his wife, which was actually his half-sister. You know kind of how that works back in that time. Yeah.
As always.
So...
got daughters with werewolves, sisters with mummies.
Yeah.
Good thing zombies don't get it on.
Well, it's like if you go back and you read, not Interview with a Vampire, but The Vampire Lestat, the second book.
Sure.
Horrible with incest. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you were telling me about that when you were reading it.
Yeah, I was like, okay. It got pretty bad there. But anyway, this 1932 movie was actually not supposed to be like a horror movie per se. It was supposed to be like a cautionary tale about meddling with other cultures.
I can see it.
Yeah. So it was just like a warning, like, hey, we shouldn't be doing this. And, you know, the tomb itself had warnings to begin with, and now all these people have died mysteriously.
Yeah.
I think the first
that would
person...
definitely create a craze around it.
Yeah, I think the first person, not in the expedition itself that died, but actually came back to America. He actually died of an infected mosquito bite.
Yeah, he died from, it wasn't infected, I think it was malaria.
No, an infected.
Oh, was it infected?
Yeah, it was an infected mosquito bite, and he didn't even have malaria. No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I knew it was something from a mosquito.
It's always mosquitoes.
It's always mosquitoes.
Them little pests.
Do you know mosquitoes
Those little vampires.
have the highest amount of kills associated with them
Yes.
than anything else in the world?
Yep.
Yeah.
And did you know
That's
that
surprising.
the females are the only ones that bite?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you ever get
They're bloodsuckers.
if you ever get bit by a mosquito, slap that bitch.
So one culture I actually found that was really interesting was the Buddhist culture back in the day. They actually practiced self-mummification. So they would...
He's all confused.
What?
Did you see his face?
I just
What?
imagine like, all right,
That's
let's
hilarious.
cut my little heart out. All right, let's put it in there.
Yeah, so...
Self-mummification.
yeah.
You'll understand in a minute.
Buddhists would actually, they would starve themselves for years, and they would only eat foods that would promote the body to decay. And then once they got towards the end of their life, our producer's looking at me funny now. So once they get towards the end of their life and they were ready to die, they would actually drink a poisonous sap that would cause vomiting to get the rest of the fluids out of the body. And then they would bury themselves alive and wait for death.
Oh God.
And
Gosh.
because of
It's
this,
the worst way to go out.
yeah, because of this self-mummification practice, and the body wasn't dried out and preserved correctly, it very seldom worked. So I'm assuming Buddhists do not practice this anymore. I've never heard of it. So
Let's make a little research journey. Let's go to China. Let's talk to some Buddhists.
yeah, I actually found that really interesting. I never heard of self-mummification before.
Yeah, I'm shocked that is/was a thing.
Yeah, it's just no.
Jeez.
We definitely like food, so
Yes.
I'm not starving myself.
Doing it. No.
And that's about all the research that there was on the mummy. Like, a lot of the stuff I kept clicking on and looking over again was just all about King Tut, and it kept going in depth about King Tut, and I was like, it's not exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the mummy, not King Tut's story on that.
And that's kind of understandable, because I think with the mummy, that they've had a few movies, but I still think it's kind of a newer kind of concept.
Yeah.
So, and there hasn't been a whole lot of movies, original, different types of movies done on the mummy. So, I mean, you know, so here we'll pick, what's your favorite mummy movie?
The Brendan Fraser one.
But it's the mummy. So,
I would pick the second Brendan Fraser one.
but
Out of
it's
the trilogy.
still,
Yeah. Just
it's
because
still part
it
of
has
the mummy
Rock in it.
series.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Right? So
It looks so bad.
you don't
but
have
it's so good.
you don't have that vast.
Yeah, you don't have like
don't really have that
1,000
many.
movies
you don't
to
have.
pick from.
Yeah, you don't. I mean, where with werewolves, I mean,
You
there
have
are
like
so
the
many.
Wolfman and all these other things in modern day culture.
Exactly.
Things, especially with zombies, like a million movies come
Million
out every
movies,
like
yes.
decade with zombies,
Right.
and yet mummies, it's like maybe
And there's
like 3 or
a
4.
million movies with
in the last 3 years.
vampires,
Yeah.
and I mean, you these ones have just grown so much. Where the mummy, and I think maybe because there isn't a whole lot of scariness about them, that there's very few, because they can't really make a lot of
it's not like zombies
different,
where it's like, oh, they literally come to life just to eat humans, or werewolves where it's like it's just a little beast or whatnot.
exactly.
It's like, oh, they're just they're just mummies.
Yeah. And
Especially
I think
like
that's
earlier,
probably why there's not a whole
uh,
lot on that.
Yeah, there's really
Things
not
about
too
it.
much. I just found the Buddhist thing of self-mummification.
Yeah,
just
that
weird.
That is
is
shocking.
very,
I'm
very strange.
That's gonna stay with me for like the next like the next time we get together. I'm gonna be like, I'm still not over that Buddhist thing.
You just shocked me, and I'll be shocked for months.
Yeah.
Pretty
I think
much, right?
the best part about the Brendan Fraser, the mommy, was his relationship with Benny.
Oh, yeah.
I loved
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Looks like I have the boat. You're on the wrong side of the river. So I'm looking around, it's like, crap.
They made it really funny, and I liked that because you kind of had the scary parts in there where, you know, they're doing it out with the mummy, with Imhotep, but I mean, Brendan Fraser's just hilarious in that movie.
The one scene about the Mummy movie that always like stuck with me every time I watched it was the first time the scarab pops out and it goes into the guy. Yeah. Because I don't like insects that much. And, like, the whole scarab scene, like, a little 12-year-old me watching, like, this guy get eaten by, like, scarabs. I'm just like, stop, turn it off. Yeah. Like, when you watch the movie now, the effects don't exactly hold up. You can really tell how CGI it is, but at the time, it was pretty
Yes,
pretty
at the
good.
time when it came out, that was like, one of the best movies. Really, I mean, I've seen it so many times; it's unreal. And I think most of the time I watch it just for the comedy.
Yeah, it's a really funny movie.
It is very funny. Brendan Fraser's just like the best in that.
That's like one of those.
I actually think that's the only thing I've ever seen Brendan Fraser in.
I think it's the only thing
George of the
worth seeing
Jungle?
him in.
No, I've never watched it.
You've never seen George of the Jungle?
You've never seen George of the Jungle?
No.
I loved him in George of the Jungle.
The movie's terrible, but he is good.
It's terrible, like, nowadays, but I mean, like, when I was a kid, that was awesome.
Yeah, for kids, it's like, it's so good. Like, it's one of those movies where as a kid you love it, and then as an adult you rewatch it and you're like, I liked this. I
You know what? I
liked this.
just did that with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Which one?
The first one.
First one? It's still good.
I know I just loved this movie as a kid, but I'm looking at it going, really? What?
Really?
It was so corny.
Taken aback. Yeah.
It was so corny.
So corny. That's like half of the charm.
I guess, but yeah, it's different. It's weird the different aspects that you have seen these movies when you're younger versus being an adult now.
Yeah, especially like if it's one of those movies where you haven't seen it since you were a kid, and then you rewatch it and you're like, oh, I remember this movie, and then scenes happen, you're like, I don't remember this scene. Yeah, I don't remember this scene.
Or I don't remember it being this weird or this stupid or...
There's a lot of kid movies, like almost like 90% of kids movies have these things in it where they hide like adult jokes in it. And then you don't pick those up until you rewatch
because you're a
them.
kid.
Yeah,
you know,
and then you watch
don't
this
get
and you're
'em.
like, wow, that was inappropriate.
Yeah.
So, like, I think it was either Toy Story 1 or 2, where I forgot the one girl who was like herding the sheep who was supposed to be with Woody. What's her name?
Oh, I think that was the second one.
Josie?
I think so.
Something
but
like that.
She does something, and she more or less flirts with Buzz, and his wings pop out. Like, she walks over or something and like touches his shoulder, and his wings pop out, and like it's like that's an innuendo right there. Yeah, and I was like, as a kid, I was like, whatever, it's a kids movie. Yeah, I enjoy it. And then I told him like, all right, that's pretty funny.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna move to mine. We're gonna do
one thing.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I mentioned to her earlier about mummies. So in ancient Egypt, they did the whole mummification to get people into the afterlife, and like the better off they were, the better they are in the afterlife. And one thing that I learned about that they did was for some mummies, they would actually, before putting them in the tomb, they would coat them in a type of what's what I'm looking for? Perfume.
Perfume, that's right, you were telling me
So
about that.
they would coat the mummy in perfume so it would smell good. And apparently the better the mummy smelled, the easier it is to get into the afterlife.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's an odd one. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, I found that out and I was like, that's odd. I never would imagine like a mummy smelling like perfume.
Well, no.
Yeah,
I mean, it's,
no.
kind of rotten flesh.
Yeah.
Maybe they did it to try to help keep some of the smell down.
Yeah.
So
I
like
thought that was
a big
interesting.
thing with the mummies like back in ancient Egypt is with ancient Egypt, they were all mummified. Like, as in, like, some cultures, only the wealthy was mummified because it was an expensive process. But, like, in ancient Egypt, if you were poor and you were, like, living in a mud hut, like, all the money and all the riches you're making is going in your tomb. Like, you're not going to enjoy it in this life because this life is only temporary, whereas, like, the afterlife is permanent. So you want to take everything with you.
Everything with you.
And so you had to, like, go through these trials and pass the trials and the balance of the feather versus your heart with Osiris. And so they would purposely put certain things in the tomb to take with them on this journey so that they could pass these tests. And maybe that's where the perfume came from, because they have to pass these tests. And maybe if Osiris was like, yeah, you smell bad, I don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wrote a paper on Egyptian rituals like 10 years ago for my death and dying class. And so it's been a while, but I just remember the trials and then, like, the balance of the heart versus the feather. And I think your heart's supposed to weigh less.
I think your heart is supposed to weigh less because the more, like, remorse and guilt you have, the more it drags down your heart.
Yeah, and I think the feather's supposed to weigh more, and that's how you get into the afterlife. If your heart weighs more, then you're not going anywhere.
Your soul gets consumed by some...
Yeah, it gets consumed.
I forget the name of it.
I forgot, yeah. It was some kind of, like...
It's like
no,
Pothos.
No.
It's usually depicted as, like, a snake-like being.
Yeah,
and I forget the name, but yeah.
Yeah, it consumed your soul, and then you were no longer going to have an afterlife at all.
Yeah.
So, we can go to your zombies now.
So, zombies actually, I think, are probably one of the oldest monsters. Not that it came to popular culture as far as horror genre, but I think it dates as far as, how far back in history it goes. It was dated back from the 18th century, and it was from the Congo. And the word that they used was Zambi, which is actually spelled Nzambi. And it was, that word actually means spirit of a dead person. So in that aspect, it was a person that came back to life, but that person had no speech and had no free will. And they used as, like, slaves and things. They were depicted as slaves. They would be, pretty much owned by somebody, and they would do their biddings or whatnot. The actual zombie word didn't come into the English language until, like, 1819, and it was actually first used in a poem by a poet. But I think from there, it just kind of started keep going, because then you had, like, Edgar Allan Poe start using the word zombie, and some of the more popular poets starting to use it too. A lot of people actually think that, like, zombies come from the voodoo religion, and it didn't really come from there. It just kind of... The voodoo practice magic, and that's pretty much where people kind of interpret the zombies to come into with the voodooism, but it's not necessarily from voodoo. It just kind of coincides a little bit. But so most of like your older zombies are going to be created from magic, where nowadays, I mean, even your movies and things, people think zombies are created from viruses. So you've got the two different aspects of how they're created, and, like, what century these are from. You got the older centuries where it's all created by magic from witches and all that stuff, or the voodoo priestess bringing back people and things like that. But nowadays it's a virus. I mean, you've got Resident Evil. Those are all created by the T-virus and, all that kind of stuff. So it's all, it's changed.
It's more scientific.
Yeah, it's scientific is more than supernatural, where back then it was more supernatural because it was witchcraft and, just that kind of stuff. Now, most people also think that George Romero's Night of the Living Dead was the first zombie movie, and that is actually very incorrect. The first zombie movie that was created back in 1932, and the director was Victor Halperin, I think. It starred Bela Lugosi, and the name of the movie was White Zombie.
All right.
I remember that one.
Yeah, I made you watch it. I actually really love that one. I like Bela Lugosi.
Yeah,
I like him a lot. But so the actual first zombie movie was that White Zombie. It was black and white, but it was actually really kind of scary. And then it just kind of moved forward. I know there was another movie called Last Man on Earth.
Yep, seen that one.
Vincent Price.
Yep.
And that one actually, I think, was about zombies too, if I remember right. But so it's George Romero didn't come till the 80s. It was Night of the Living Dead.
No, it was
70s.
70s. Yeah,
Early
70s.
Yeah, early 70s. And then, of course, he came, after that and just kind of kept going with his movies. He's got
He brought zombies into the mainstream.
Yeah, he did. He really did. He mainstreamed zombies, but what's really funny is he didn't mean to create zombies. He was trying to create a better vampire.
Sure.
And so when he made Night of the Living Dead, is what he was trying to do was make a vampire kind of different, and actually ended up making like a zombie.
So he set out to improve one monster and create a whole new one to the mainstream.
He created a whole new genre of monster. But yeah, he did. He wanted a better vampire, and through the whole movie, you never hear him call them zombies. They are called ghouls.
Yep.
So that's what he was actually trying to create.
Ghouls.
He was trying to create a better type of vampire. So he accidentally created a zombie. And now you've got, TV shows. You've got, of course, The Walking Dead.
TV shows,
just
movies, games, everything.
Yeah, games. Yeah, everything you can think of is zombies.
Yeah, it's like George Romero is basically credited with being the father of the whole zombie genre, and yet he's over here like, whoops.
Yeah, kinda. There's just so many movies. The top 5 just for zombies alone is going to be World War Z, which I actually really love, because I love the fact that they weren't just slow and
they were these fast, dangerous.
They were these fast, just gonna get you. And it was scarier than hell, because if those types of zombies are actually what can be, the whole world is screwed, because they're too fast, you turn too quick. I mean, it was insane. It was a whole different look on zombies, and that's what I loved about that movie. I know you didn't like it, you read the book, and you didn't like the fact that it just kind of centered around the one guy. But
no, he's not even a character in the book. He doesn't exist.
But I liked it from the fact that it was so much different than the normal zombie movie, where they're slow, they're just, kind of there. These things were just going to take over the world, and there was nothing you could do about it. Pretty much is what it was, So I loved that movie. The second grossing movie was Zombieland, and I know we've talked about Zombieland.
We talked about it a lot on the previous one.
And yeah, we did. But that is, it's a great movie. I mean, you got Woody Harrelson, and it's just a great movie all the way around. And then the next one is Warm Bodies, which I have never seen. I don't think any.
Don't watch it.
You seen it?
It's terrible.
It's terrible.
It's Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, pretty much. I've
And,
seen previews
yeah.
of it, but I never did actually want to watch it.
Yeah, to just quickly explain it, like, zombie guy finds girl, falls in love with a girl, love for girl turns him into a human.
Yeah.
Oh, it turns him back to human?
Yes.
Yep.
So then all these other zombies are like,
Yeah, because
oh,
they
we
see...
can go back to being human.
because they see how much he loves her and she loves him, yada, yada, yada. And their just love for the two of them turn them all into humans. So the end of the movie is everyone's human because he fell in love with her.
Even though he ate her boyfriend.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he eats her boyfriend, goes to eat her. She's like, so beautiful. So he's like, I can't do it. And then he falls in love with her. Movie happens. Terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. That's good.
So,
All right.
don't watch it.
So, yeah, okay. So the fourth one is going to be Resident Evil Afterlife. Now, Resident Evil is actually pretty big. They've got 4 or 5?
6, I think.
6. And then there's games. They've got games out
games
for
they have
Resident
7
Evil.
now. Although I
this
think
was a whole
there's
total
offshoots.
different type of look at zombies too when it first came out
Mm.
with the T virus, and they're not really, these slow moving.
Yeah. Some
Yeah,
would
I mean,
argue
some of
that
the-
they're not even zombies; they're mutants because they're infected with this virus. But that's a whole spiel. in
but
itself.
pretty much Resident Evil is based around a zombie type of apocalypse. So, and then the next one would be the remake 2004 Dawn of the Dead,
which we talked about.
Yes,
Which we
which
talked
we
about.
also talked
Other
about.
episode, which we all love. Such a big movie.
Not all of us. No, but I obviously I didn't see anything on how, like, for as long as far as the older zombies on how to kill them. If it's magical, I would assume for the from
They'll run out of food eventually.
but I know through movies and things like that, most of the ways to kill them are
It's always just shoot them in the
right
head.
in the head. You got to destroy the brain, is what it is. But there isn't a whole lot of differences on
Yeah.
the cultures
It's
and,
not like
and
werewolves
how to,
where it's like there's
Yeah,
15
exactly.
different ways to cure a werewolf. It's like
Yes.
shoot them in the head.
And of course, there is no cure as far as like anything else that we've ever that
Love.
I've ever seen. I don't
Love.
know.
If you watch
Love.
Warm Bodies, it's
Well,
love.
okay, so yeah, okay, anything that I've ever seen.
Just walk up to a zombie. I love you, human.
Guess that's the only way to cure one. Huh? But some of them I wouldn't want to get close to,
No.
especially the ones in World War Z. That's not going to happen.
So I have to make a side note because you guys keep talking about World War Z and how all these like zombies became like fast moving. Okay, first movie that depicted these zombies being fast moving and scary 28 days later. We have
Yes.
not talked
That
about
is
that.
very true.
However,
That
some
is-
would argue that they're not zombies. They're infected with a rage virus that makes
They're
them
zombies.
act out.
They're
They
zombies.
are zombies, yes.
Yeah.
And that is actually one of the movies that I forgot about.
I love that
And
movie.
I do like.
Yeah.
Did you see the second one, 28 weeks,
Weeks
later?
later? Yeah.
I didn't really care for that one quite as much.
Yeah.
But yes, they are. I don't think they're as scary as the ones in World War Z, but they're pretty. They're pretty
But
freaking
that
scary.
was the first one where they were running.
Fast running.
That's
and
true.
whatnot.
And
That's true. I
that's
always
why,
forget about that one.
Yeah,
though.
that's why when 28 Days Later came out, it was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge because
is
everybody
true.
was just like, oh
They're
my
zombies.
God, they
And they
run.
And they run. Yeah, that's the thing. If they run like that, it's just like you can.
That was
you
like,
dust
I remember
that.
watching that when it first came out, and I was just, that was like the first zombie movie. I was like, I have to watch it again and again and again because now they're actually scary. So.
Yeah, because then the slow moving, kind of just meandering around. I mean, you
they're
can
easy to
walk
deal with.
faster than they can,
Yeah.
So they're just kind of annoying. They're just kind of there. You run across one or two. You can get to them or get away from them. But yeah, 28 Days Later and World War Z, those ones, not getting away from.
Yeah.
Just not.
right. Well, I think that wraps up our monsters thing. So, yeah. So, hopefully you enjoyed us talking about monsters. I know I enjoyed talking about werewolves. That was fun.
The next one, we're going to be doing our special 80s.
Yep,
so please stick around
our
for that.
Probably 2-part 80s.
Yes, it's going to be a two-parter.
Maybe
2 parts, yeah.
And we'll have a special guest there, so stick around to see who that is. It's no one special, but
I'm going to tell him that when he gets here and be like, "You're nobody special."
Yeah. We're going to talk about our 80s, and so I'm excited for that.
It's going to be special.
Yeah. A lot of work's going into it.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, so that's why we're doing a couple of these before those.
Yeah.
So, but stick around. Thank you for joining us at Ghoulin Around.
Yeah.
Click down below if you like.
Like, subscribe,
Yep,
click the
there you
links,
go.
follow us on Facebook, all that good stuff.
The links, wherever they are on the little buttons.
I know for sure it's going to be right here.
It's going to be right there.
Because I'll put it there. And, keep going.